first of all, how did this deal with David Gilliland Racing come together for you to come back in their 17 truck?
Well, as it turned out, once I found out that I was going to have an opportunity to come back, that I got some partner support, I reached out to a former crew chief of mine that I raced with in 2007. His name is Doug George. And since Doug is an active crew chief in the truck series, he's got a real good eye on what's going on, in terms of opportunities that may or may not be available to be able to get behind the wheel of a truck. So he was basically my boots on the ground, and he started pulling a few people's coattails, and turned out he talked to David Gilliland, and David said, yeah, I'd be willing to step out of my 17 truck, if the opportunity is right. And so after a couple of negotiations, we got to a point where we were both happy.
And I'm sure a lot of what I'm about to ask you has already been asked in the last few days for sure, but hopefully there's a little bit of variance here. And how are you approaching returning to trucks, racing at Atlanta, and prepping for your first race in almost 14 years? Have you done any iRacing simulator, any of that, or is it just you're just going to get in and go?
You know what? I'm glad I'm not just going to get in and go, because this past weekend I got behind the wheel of a simulator called SimCraft, and SimCraft works off the iRacing platform, but it's a really dynamic piece of equipment. It's, I think, 6-axis. I mean, it moves all sorts of different directions. And so with the iRacing engine, I was able to get some laps under my belt, so to speak, that way. And that was very helpful. Tried some different setups and what have you, and tried some different scenarios with different, people. Well, actually, another guy who is a pretty good sim racer with me. And so we had some fun and mixed it up. And so that was good. So I kind of got my feet wet, and I was happy I got that opportunity. And then as a result of being part of David Gilliland Racing and Ford Performance, I was able to take advantage of being in the Ford simulator last night. So that was very valuable as well. It also is like a 6-axis or 6-motion, whatever you want to call it, simulator, but obviously a very different model than the iRacing platform. It works off a different model. I'm not sure how all of its laser scanning compares and contrasts with the iRacing, but there is definitely some difference between the two appearances of the track and the feel of the track. So between, all the simulations, I'm hoping that once I get actually on the track itself, I'll have a good enough understanding of what to expect, and, the different ways of the dynamics of the truck and how it acts in dirty air, clean air, new tires, long run tires, et cetera, and so on. So that was very valuable for me. It definitely accelerated my learning curve. I mean, look, after not having driven a truck in 14 years, I mean, even though I have great memories and fond memories of what it was like, the platforms have changed, right? I mean, the motors are different now. Now they got like an Ilmor crate motor, whereas before all the manufacturers had their own motors, and we were spinning them to like 8,800 RPM. Well, this motor they have now only buzzes to about 7,200 RPM. It's very different. It's very low RPM, a lot of torque. The bodies appear to have a bit more downforce than they had back when I was driving. So, the whole situation is going to be different. I'm not familiar with these guys and girls that I'm going to be racing against and with. So that's going to be a new experience. But I'd say the biggest thing is just going for broke effectively right from the drop of the green, right? I mean, back when I was running, you had an opportunity to kind of, wind into it, right? I mean, you had practice, you had qualifying, and then you had the race. Now it's, they drop the green rag and you go, right? I mean, there is no warm up. It's, on kill from the start. So that's going to be a very different experience. I got an opportunity to meet Haley Deegan, one of my teammates, yesterday when I was in the shop. And she told me that was one of the biggest adjustments for her. It was just, wow, it's just right off the top of the hat. We're going. And she also was indicating to me that throughout the whole field, everybody is going at it like it's the last lap. And I'm like, really? I mean, it's kind of hard to get to the finish line when you have that mentality. So I'm not too sure I'm going to take that approach. My objective is to get there to the black and white checkered flag, not to the stage flags per se, but to the end of the race. So, I'm hoping that, some experience will rule over the youth and exuberance that's throughout the rest of the field. So it'll be interesting. I'm wide open in terms of what to expect. I have no preconceived notions. I've watched some of the truck races, needless to say, and there seems to be a whole lot of carnage going on. I mean, it's like, these kids, I mean, it's like they just crunch them up and they bring more. It seems like everybody's got an endless budget, it appears, but in any event, I don't. So I want to make this a positive experience. I want to be able to get all, 200 laps in and, come back with a clean truck and see what happens next.
And talking about like the sports state today, last year, NASCAR took some steps toward further inclusivity with the sport, banning the Confederate flag, the driver gestures like the Cup Field standing in solidarity with Bubba at Talladega, and then, of course, Bubba later running the Black Lives Matter scheme within a few weeks of that race. So what did all of that mean to you?
Oh, I mean, that was tremendous. I was so glad to see that NASCAR took the position that they did by banning the flag. It was long overdue. I mentioned that the flag made me uncomfortable when I was racing, in regularity in the mid 2000s, but that wasn't the time. I mean, the ears were not open, the minds were not open. But with regard to all the things that happened last year, one of the positive things is that people became more receptive to some of the racial injustice and police brutality. And, it's just some of the systemic racism that is in this country. And so NASCAR, took note of it as well. It took obviously the nudge by Bubba. And fortunately, Bubba was racing, at the highest level of the sport and had a great platform to stand on. And he used it. So to his credit, I commend him for doing so. And I commend NASCAR for realizing, look, if we're going to be reflective of this country, and be like an American sport, we have to be more reflective of the hue of this country, and that means more diversity. And so they made the statement. I'm hoping they're going to stick to it from the standpoint that they're going to implement more, actions, measurable actions, quantifiable actions that are going to move the needle in terms of everybody feeling comfortable being involved in the sport. Because, needless to say, traditionally, when the Confederate flag was waving, we didn't want any part of it as African Americans, so that was just a huge deterrent. So with that being lowered and basically banned, now it's going to be a matter of NASCAR, I think, reaching out to, more diverse groups and trying to embrace the sport for them so that it's something that we want to be a part of. I think Bubba doing well and effectively winning, would go a long way towards moving the needle as well as far as the African American community. We're very big on rallying behind those that are winning, and so it's going to be a tough, challenge for him because he's in a brand new team. People are like, well, how come Bubba's not winning yet? He's got TRD stuff and Joe Gibbs stuff and blah, blah, so on and so forth. I mean, realistically, come on. It takes a moment for all the parts and pieces and people and everything to gel. It's a chemistry, it's a bond. It's basically knowing what everybody's going to do before they say they need to do it, that sort of thing. It's got to be a well-oiled machine. It's a ballet. And so, it's going to take a little bit of time for everything there to gel. But I do believe that, they do have the right foundation underneath them in terms of JGR and TRD, giving them an open book and them utilizing it. I don't think Denny Hamlin nor Michael Jordan is interested in coming up short. So, I think things will come together. But I also believe that Bubba made a huge statement by saying he expects to win 2 races this year. That's a huge statement. That's a lot of confidence. And so I hope that he's able to back it up. And, all the doubters and the naysayers, I hope he's able to send them home.
And with those steps, you kind of touched on it a little bit, but what kind of outlook does that give you for further diversity in NASCAR's future? And how, I guess, in your opinion, does more diversity in ownership, like this year with Michael Jordan and Pitbull coming into the sport, open the door, pave the road for more opportunities for drivers and owners as they climb through the ranks of NASCAR?
Yeah, and it's even more than just drivers and owners. It's across the gamut, I mean, just more participation in the sport. I've seen a huge change in the complexion of folks on pit road, both male and female, those are white as well as those of color. I mean, when I was racing in the mid 2000s, there was nobody that looked like me on pit road except for one guy, William Wilson, who was with Jim Smith's Ultra Motorsports team, Dodge team. But beyond him, there was nobody. And now when I see the pit crews in NASCAR, it's like, wow, this is great. Not only racial diversity, but gender diversity. It's fantastic, so I enjoy seeing that. But yeah, I mean, I think that with Michael Jordan and Pitbull joining the sport, that's raising eyebrows, that's creating more exposure. and, more talk and more buzz. And with that becomes more interest. And so folks, I believe, will tune in. Pitbull, I mean, he's got a lot of energy. He's out there just going crazy, just like he is. And that generates a lot of excitement. Michael Jordan's more laid back, more subdued, but as soon as he starts showing up around the track and, they start interviewing him and, the networks and what have you bring that forward, then people are going to start taking interest, So I think that the opportunities in NASCAR to expand are huge. I think that the traditional typical fan has been tapped out. That marketplace has been, almost aged out. And so they got to backfill. And I think it's a great opportunity what NASCAR is doing in terms of reaching a broader, cross section of people.
And looking at your career as a whole, your first race was in Xfinity in 1999. Then you made one start in trucks in 2000, then 5 in 2001, and then ran your first full season in 2002. So what were the biggest things you learned during those one-offs to prepare you for that first full season? And what were the biggest obstacles getting into racing, whether it was just getting into the sport itself or once you got there?
So, with regard to the one-offs that I was doing to get ready for the full season, the big thing was just understanding NASCAR racing. I had no familiarity with it. I did not come from a dirt oval background. I came from a, road racing sports car background where I was used to, in a 3 to 4 mile lap, 15 turns or so, right and left, upshift, downshift, turn right and turn left, trail braking, heel toe, all that kind of stuff, as opposed to being in a big, heavy stock car and just turning left. Understanding the dynamics of the vehicle, understanding how NASCAR works, it's a very rudimentary car compared to what I was used to. When you talk about high-tech sports cars, with independent rear end suspensions, fuel injection, and all that kind of stuff, and a lot of telemetry, NASCAR didn't have that. It was like, again, a Ford 9-inch rear end, solid axle, rear end, and truck arm suspension, and just archaic. It basically a tube frame with sheet metal body put on it. I was used to carbon fiber and composites and light and nimble, big tires, big brakes, big downforce. Stock car had none of that. So my early races were just trying to understand the vehicle dynamics and understanding how a NASCAR team works, which is very different than a stock car team. And, how the Southern culture is, here in the Southeast in terms of NASCAR, very different than what I was used to, which is more, international with regard to sports cars. You got folks from all different countries, and it's a cultural melting pot. Whereas in, stock car racing, when I was first doing it, it was really just all folks in the Southeast, just growing up country and just, I was not, I grew up very white collar, I have an electrical engineering, computer science degree from Berkeley and a 15-year career in Hewlett Packard. And, some of these guys who were nut and bolting my trucks, barely had a high school education. So it was a very different dynamic. So it was a good opportunity for me to understand how it works. And I did that. And so what was your other question? The other question was what?
Like the biggest obstacles in, I guess, getting into racing. And you mentioned the systemic racism in NASCAR to some degree. So what were the biggest obstacles you encountered in that regard?
So the biggest obstacle, quite frankly, is the ability to get the opportunity to go racing. And what I mean by that is just how expensive it is and just how little access to capital both myself as well as other people of color have in terms of getting the sponsorship from corporate America. Most of the decision makers are, typically white male. And when, it cuts down to a 6, 7, 8-figure budget decision, then you become part of mainstream marketing. You're not a, diversity spend, you're not a target market spend. You are in mainstream, marketing budgets. And then you're up against all the other things that these companies can spend their marketing dollars on. Why would they spend, 7, 8 figures on you racing a car as opposed to, the NFL, or the NBA, or pro beach volleyball, or extreme this or that or the other, right? They have endless numbers of options. So the hard thing is just getting the financial backing to be able to do it. Unless you're just independently wealthy, which I am not, and I don't have that pedigree last name or anything like that. I wasn't born in the sport. I wasn't brought up through the sport. You got to hustle for it. And, it's more than just hustling on the racetrack. It's hustling to have the opportunity to get to the racetrack. I've always said that this professional motorsports is politics first, business second, and sport third. The politics is getting in the room, getting into a situation where you can hopefully be around people that can open doors for you financially, make your dream a reality. Then comes the business aspect. Once you've gotten the audience with those people, you have to justify why they're going to spend that money. That's the business. What's the ROI? Why are they doing this? And then at the end of the day, if you're able to succeed in those two realms, you get to actually don a hat and go do what you want to do. You get to race. So sport third. So that's the hardest part, is just, again, just having the opportunity to get behind the wheel.
And as a whole, how do you reflect on your time racing in NASCAR, whether it was Xfinity, the couple of cup starts you did, the full-time truck efforts, and then coming back to Atlanta, getting the opportunity to come back this weekend?
Well, I've been very fortunate. For somebody who probably should have never made it, I did make it, at a very late stage in life. I became a full-time professional race car driver at 40 years of age, which is an age where most race car drivers are ending their career. They're starting out in their single-digit years, or at least in their teens. I didn't start racing until I was in my 20s. And, I got the opportunity to race sports cars. I've done 10 Rolex 24 hours. I've tested open wheel cars, Toyota Atlantics, Indy Lights. I've gotten the opportunity to race in NASCAR at the very top level in Cup. I've gotten to go back and race sports cars in the Grand Am Series, or IMSA Series now, and Daytona Prototype. And, one race with Jordan Taylor, factory Corvette driver in 2011, first black driver to do that. Again, just now be able to come full circle and come back into NASCAR at 60 years of age. That's kind of unheard of. My whole story is, again, just breaking the mold. I've just done everything so atypically. That's why my memoir, my book, is called Winning in Reverse. I did everything the opposite way, effectively, of what a typical race car driver does. So in reflecting on, my story, I feel I'm blessed. I'm feeling very fortunate. I wouldn't have done anything any differently. I took advantage of every opportunity that was provided to me, and I made the best of it. I carried myself, I think, with the utmost of, dignity and respect, and just held myself in I think, good regard, esteem. My family, my race. I don't think I put a wheel wrong in any respect that way. So I'm proud of what I've been able to accomplish, and we'll see what happens this weekend. It's a tall order. I'm basically jumping into the deep end, and it's sink or swim. And I'm hoping to think that I'm going to be swimming, but there are no guarantees. It's a fast track. It's an abrasive track. These folks have been racing day in and day out, week in and week out, and I haven't done it in quite a long time. So I got a tall, hurdle to get over. But I've always had firm belief in myself, and I've always had a passion for the sport. And I'm doing one of the things that I outlined in my book. I've identified 8 keys to my success, and the most important one is passion. But right up next to that is getting out of your comfort zone. So that's what I'm going to be doing this weekend.
And if I could ask one more very quick thing, when you made that adjustment when you were racing, when you had the opportunity to go to Cup, you talked a little bit about that with Bill Davis. What were the biggest differences you noticed between the trucks, where you had spent so much time, and the Cup cars? And then as a spectator, since your last truck start, how have you seen the sport change a little bit?
So with regard to the biggest changes between truck and Cup, gigantic in terms of the amount of power, but more so the way the body is shaped in a car versus the truck. The truck is almost like a parachute by comparison to the car. When you get out of the throttle in the truck, the thing will naturally slow down. In a Cup car, you got to get on the brakes. It's not trying to slow down. It was unbelievable just how much momentum you can carry into the corners, and you are forced to get on the brake. Whereas in a truck, you can just lift out of it, roll out of the power, get back into the power. It's fine. It's got a lot of side force. The car does not. The car is it's very much, again, shaped like a bullet. It doesn't want to slow down. It's got a lot of horsepower, so you get into those corners a whole lot faster. But beyond that, it's just the level of competition throughout the field. In the truck series, you got guys, that are senior, like I am. You got, kids that are just trying to start out and make a name for themselves, and everything in between. In the Cup series, everybody is good. That's all there is to it. Throughout the field, you may not have the great equipment that somebody in the front does, but it's not as if you don't know how to drive. If you're in the Cup series, you know how to drive, period, bar none. So that's one of the biggest things as well. Again, It's just the level of proficiency throughout the whole, platform, whether it be, the way the cars are prepped, the way the crews are efficient in operating, the way the drivers are driving, just all of it is just on another level than from the truck series. And then what was your next question?
Just about how you've seen the sport evolve as watching after your last truck star. How have you seen it evolve over the last 14 years?
So how, in terms of how it's evolved, watching it on television, it's kind of hard to see how it's evolved. The one thing that I took note of is that there seems to be a whole lot of carnage in the truck races these days. And it seems like, these kids are racing like it's the last lap of the race from the first lap, and it's like, you can't get to the checkered flag if you're out there wadding your stuff up, on stage one, so in terms of the evolution, I think there's a lot of exuberance, a lot of youth in the truck series. I'm hoping not to be a part of that and be collected in any of that garbage, but needless to say, with the advent of stage racing, that has made it a lot different. The fact that there's now a playoffs, whereas when I was racing, there was no playoffs, so that gives a different mentality and such for those that are racing for a championship. But for me, I think the biggest difference will be that these trucks now don't turn the RPM that they used to. And it's much more of a momentum type of drive now. And what I mean by that is that before you could really just get almost out of the throttle and then just go right back to throttle and the response was there. Now you got to, from what I can tell, keep a little bit underneath you, keep that engine kind of wound up all the time so that you can, when you go back to power, be right back on the pipe, because if you're not, it's going to take you almost a lap to get that, RPM and that momentum back where you had it before. So I think that's going to be different. But other than that, it's going to be interesting to be able to determine what the differences are. I won't really have a really good answer for you until after our race.